Over the last 10 years, I've dedicated most of my life traveling all across this country, sharing my story. And over the last 10 years as a public speaker, unexpectedly, pretty blessed to walk into rooms and present in front of groups like you, the high school this morning, Ohio State, the Patriots, the Packers, the Bears, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Royals, Harvard, West Point, Yale, TED Talks, prisons, and college commencements. But over the last 10 years, I've had a responsibility of walking into auditoriums like this and presenting in front of almost 2 million children. And I truly believe in my heart that it's made a difference for some. I do this for many reasons. One, just like some of you, I wanted to skip this talk. Just like some of you, I wanted nothing to do with sitting and listening to this talk. And just like some of you, I walked into this talk with the attitude in 8th grade, all I do is drink once in a while and smoke. Drug assemblies are a joke. I would never turn into that guy. That attitude comes from what I believe is the way we've irresponsibly presented addiction to kids. I think we put way too much focus on the worst day and we forget the first day. We show you pictures of drug addicts, remind you of your family members who are struggling and say, look how horrible life turned out for them in the end. Rather than sitting you down now, looking you in the eye and asking you honestly, with all you've been through, some of you, the struggle you've seen, why in the world would you take a chance and let it begin for you? I do this because 10 years ago I walked into a gymnasium that had 3,000 students in it. 10 years ago, 3,000 students. I was anxious and nervous, so I went into the hallway and I said a quick prayer. Please, God, just one kid. If I can help one kid out of 3,000, it's worth it. So I walked in, took the mic, and I told it. After I told it, we did Q&A. After Q&A, I saw no more hands, so I was comfortable with ending the presentation. And as I'm exiting, this little girl in the front row tapped me on my leg, and she said, hold up, Mr. Herren, and she pointed way up to the top. At the top of the bleachers, sitting amongst 3,000 high school kids, was a little girl with her hand up. So I started walking towards her so I could hear her as I'm walking in her direction. Kids sitting up next to her started laughing at her and making fun of her, telling her to put her hand down, looking at me, cut her off, Mr. Herren, you can leave, don't bother with her, she's crazy. So that little girl, who had more courage and guts than I've ever had, to raise a hand and ask a question in front of 3,000 high school students, I don't know about you, but in middle school and high school, I didn't like raising my hand in the classroom. Never mind in front of my whole school. That little girl dropped her hand, turned red, embarrassed, and said, forget it, Mr. Herren, it's not even worth it, Mr. Herren. Because nobody cares around here anyway. So I ended it. But I felt like I failed her, and I waited for her to come down the bleachers. But with 3,000 kids leaving, I lost her, and I walked out of that high school wondering. And I thank God that little girl had the courage to take that wonder away from me 2 months later. Dear Mr. Herren, you probably don't remember me because nobody does. But just in case, I wanted you to know that I didn't have a question that day. It was the first time in my life that I wanted to tell my story. See, what I was going to tell you, Mr. Herren, is that my father's an alcoholic just like your father. And my father's drinking has gone horribly wrong too. As a matter of fact, Mr. Herren, it caused my father to lose his job 4 years ago. My mom My mom's a stay-at-home mom, Mr. Herren. Not because she can. My mom stays at home because she suffers from severe depression. But I worry about my mom because my mom has to stay at home with my drunk father during the day. And sometimes, Mr. Herren, when my dad's drinking, he's not nice to my mom. And for the last 4 years, I've had to wear the same school clothes every day. And what you wear to my high school matters. And I can tell you in this email, I'm not sure if you remember, but I'm the furthest thing from being a pretty girl. And for the last 4 years, kids in my high school, they make fun of me. They take pictures of me, they laugh at me. And for the last 4 years, I've gone home from high school by myself with no friends. To be honest, Mr. Herren, I don't think anybody wants to be my friend. And for the last 4 years, my father's drinking on the couch, and my mom, she's upstairs in her bedroom with the door closed, suffering from her sadness. So, Mr. Herren, I go to my bedroom, I lock my door, I put my music on, I take my homework out, and I do the one thing after school that I know I shouldn't. I lift up my mattress, I grab a couple of razor blades, and I cut myself really bad. Mr. Herren, I'm a cutter. I have been since 6th grade. I'm scarred from my wrist to my biceps on both arms. I can no longer cut on my arms. I now cut down on my legs just to hide it from my family. But I wanted you to know that you walked into my high school that day and you said you wanted to help one kid. I really think that I'm going to be that kid. Because right after your assembly, you gave me the confidence to confront it. So I walked into the cafeteria and I sat down at the cool kids table. When the cool kids in my high school saw me sitting at their table, they started laughing at me. 2 boys started yelling at me, telling me that I didn't belong there. For the first time in my life, I stood my ground, and as soon as that whole table sat down, I rolled up my sleeves and I showed them all my scars. I looked at the 2 boys and I told them that it's not my fault my father is an alcoholic. My whole life, I've wanted my daddy to quit drinking. It's not my fault my mom suffers from depression. I'm exhausted from trying to make her smile. And it's not my fault my parents can't buy me nice things like your mom and dad buy you. I walk into this high school every day embarrassed. I hope taking pictures of me, laughing at me, and making fun of me has helped you, because it's definitely hurt me. She said, Mr. Herren, I got up and walked away. And since that day, there's been no more pictures. They stopped laughing. Some have said sorry, and a couple of girls offered to help me. So I want to thank you, Mr. Herren, not for coming to my school to tell your story. I want to thank you for coming to my high school and giving me the courage to tell mine. That little girl's been emailing me on and off for years. That little girl's email that I first got 10 years ago is the main reason why I continue to do this. See, I remember, like it was yesterday, coming to this assembly in 8th grade. I remember once in a while on weekends drinking or smoking with my friends. But what I remember most about 8th grade and high school was not the parties that I went to or how much I drank or smoked. What I remember most was the end of the night. See, at the end of the night, when it was time to go home to my mom, I didn't feel so right. I wasn't acting so cool. I was done pretending to be tough. So the Visine would come out, the gum would go in. I'd spray my clothes, I'd wash my hands. I don't know about you, but in 8th grade, I did everything to cover up the mistakes I made. See, I covered up my mistakes because my mom truly believed that her little 8th grade son, that he didn't need to do drugs or drink alcohol to hang out with kids he's known since kindergarten. And at the end of the night, I would look across the room and I would see my friends in 8th grade that didn't drink or smoke. The ones that came out with us but refused to. And at the end of the night, I would look across the room and I would see them, and I would say to myself, they have something that I'm missing, I think. How come they don't have to lie to their mom and dad? How come they don't have to cover up their mistakes? How can they have fun without it? And why do I already need it? See, when I was 16 years old, an author walked into my high school and he said, I want to write a book about you. That author who wrote the book about me when I was 16, he followed me for one high school basketball season. That author, he included 14 of my high school teammates, my best friends that I went to elementary and middle school with. Those 15 kids on my high school basketball team, our parents, doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers, stay-at-home mommies. Out of the 15 kids on my high school basketball team that thought we were so cool in high school, that drank out of red Solo cups, stole beer from our father's fridge, smoked in the woods. Out of those 15 kids who would have laughed at this assembly, made fun of it after this assembly, 7 of us became heroin addicts. But our parents are teachers. Our dads are lawyers. We're athletes. All we do is drink and smoke. Drug assemblies are a joke. We'll never be that guy. I never heard one of my childhood friends say on a Friday night with a beer in his hand, I never heard one childhood friend say, smoking, I can't wait to grow up and lose my family. I can't wait to have my kids taken from me. I can't wait to break the heart of everybody who loves me. See, because to me, that's the scariest thing about drug addiction. Nobody knows who has it. You have no idea sitting in this room right now that you're going to be the one who's going to suffer from it. None of us do. And let's be honest, there's kids in here right now that could be struggling a little bit. See, I don't know about you. I don't know how many of you have family members that struggle with drugs or alcohol, but I do. My father's drinking himself to death right now. But when I was a little boy, I didn't know what alcoholism was. I just knew that my father oftentimes had Miller Lights in his hand. And what I remember about my father's drinking is he didn't come home at night. And see, when I was in middle school, I thought it was my job to check on my mom. So I would walk past her bedroom and look in, and I would see her sitting up in bed reading books all by herself. And I'd feel sad for her. I'd go to my bedroom and I'd pray that my father would come home okay. And the nights he didn't, I remember those fights. I remember the yelling and screaming. And I remember falling asleep praying that my father would quit drinking one day. And I remember like it was yesterday, hugging my mom and making a promise to her. I don't know about you, but I broke my promise when I was 13. See, it was a day like this that I was walking home from school, and I told my best friend, don't come in my house, wait for me behind my garage. I walked into my house and I grabbed 2 of my father's Miller Lights. I put them in my pocket. I ran out of my house, went behind the garage, sat on the hill with my best friend. As soon as I pulled them out, he was shocked. I opened them. What my best friend didn't know, I've been waiting a long time to taste Miller Lights. See, my daddy misses my games because of them. He makes my mom cry over them. So these Miller Lights have to be really good. So I opened it, I drank it. As soon as I tasted it, I hated it. So I poured out the rest of it. Me and my best friend, we crushed the cans, we dug a little hole, we buried them so we didn't get caught. As soon as we got done burying them, I ran around the driveway, picked up my basketball, told my best friend, don't ever talk about this again. Started playing, and as soon as I started playing, my mom opened the slider in the back of the house, walked out onto the back deck. She pointed down to me at my driveway and said, can you please come inside? Me and you need to talk. At 13 years old, I just drank my father's beer. At 13 years old, I just broke the promise. So I told my mom, I'm coming right in. I threw my best friend the basketball. I ran down my driveway. Instead of going left to go into the front door, I panicked and I went right and I ran to the end of my street where there was woods. And I hid that day for hours in the woods. There was no way I was going to let my poor mother smell my father's booze on her little boy's breath. Do you know how many nights my mom had to fall asleep to that stink? What a life, falling asleep every night to Miller Lights. Do you know how many mornings I woke up for school and I could smell the night before coming out of his bedroom? I promise you, Mom. There's kids in here right now that have broke their promise. And let's be honest, there's kids in here right now doing things a year, 2 years ago, thought they never would. And the reality, you have friends in here right now that are sitting in their seat thinking about you. They will never show it, but they're worried about you because they listen to the stories you tell. But if they had the courage to pull you to the side, they would walk down this hallway with you, hug you, look you in the eye, and simply say to you, I want you to feel better. I don't like that you're bragging about doing this stuff. It makes me nervous. I mean, both of you are in here right now, and both of you know that. And even at a small school like this, there's kids in here right now that used to be really good friends. There's kids in here right now, 4 or 5 years ago, were best of friends. But you don't even really talk to that kid anymore. And the reality is, that kid, he knows the real you. You cut off an unbelievable friendship because that kid doesn't want to do the things you're doing now. He doesn't want to try what you're trying. He doesn't want to risk what you're risking, and he doesn't want to lie to the people who love him. See, I have children. My son is 21. This month will be 22. My daughter, she's 19, both in college. My youngest is a 6th grader. And every time I go to a school, kids would say to me, now that your kids are older and you have almost 13 years sober, how hard was it for you to see your son or your daughter drunk or high for the first time? For now, I'm still at if. My 22 and my 19-year-old have not. They've chosen to live without it. But if they do, I won't be like my mom and dad, and I won't be like some of your parents. Ignore it. If they get caught, yell and scream over it. Punish, take away because of it. I could care less who, when, where, or with. If I see my little boy drunk or high, if I see my daughter in that condition, I'm going to walk into her bedroom, I'm going to give her a big hug, I'm going to sit at the edge of her bed, I'm going to look her in the eye, and I'm going to ask her one question. Can you please just tell me why? I'm not mad at you. I just need to know why my little girl needs this now. I need to know why my son has to change himself now. We all have our why. Parents don't ask it because they're afraid of the answer, and kids don't know how to talk about it. See, I don't know how many kids in this auditorium have a little brother or sister at home. But if you do, I want you to think of them, because your little brother, your little sister needs you. They look up to you. They watch what you wear. They listen to your conversations. They'll drop everything to be next to you. Your little brother, your little sister, real talk, probably feel safest when they're next to you. See, your little brother, your little sister plan on coming to this middle school and being just like you. So I want you to sit in this auditorium right now and think of some of the things you're doing. And ask yourself one hard question. Do you really want your little sister to follow in your footsteps? You really want that little kid to do what you're doing right now? To hide what you're hiding? To keep the secrets you're keeping? To feel like they have to do things to fit in? I walk in here and my goal is that one kid in this auditorium today, that there's one student that's going to walk out of this auditorium, grab a teacher, grab a counselor, grab someone, look them in the eye, and just simply say, I'm not the kid I pretend to be. I don't want to do this anymore because I believe I'm better than this. I believe I deserve more than this. Because I wish in 8th grade, I wish I had the courage to separate myself from my friends for 1 minute, grab a teacher, and just simply say to them, I have a lot of stuff that I need to talk about with you. I have stuff in my life that I believe is holding me back. See, everybody thinks this talk is about drugs. Everybody thinks this talk is about alcohol. This talk is also about self-esteem. It's about self-worth. It's about confidence. It's about insecurities. I'm not sure what you expected walking in here today. I don't know what you expected after watching this documentary. But this talk is no longer about me. This talk is about you. This talk is your story. This is about the kid you're becoming. This is about your little sister and brother. This talk is about the sacrifices your grandparents have made for you. About the family that loves you. This kid's in here crying. And I just want you to know it's okay to talk about your tears. That there's people here willing to help you with your tears. I've been doing this for almost 12 years. And this talk is not easy for me to do. This talk is hard for me, and it's hard for some of you. Today is an opportunity to challenge each other, to redirect This talk is not about perfection. If it was, I wouldn't be the speaker. One of the most commonly asked questions, kids will say to me, you started drinking when you were 13, smoking 14, and you struggled with drugs and alcohol till you were 32. Even though you've been sober for almost 13 years, do you ever want to get high? Do you have days when you want to get drunk? And my answer from the first time has never changed. Only when I don't want to be me. Only when I look at the mirror and I don't like what I see. Not being me has always been the issue. Drugs and alcohol followed. There's kids in here today that have parents struggling. There's kids in here right now that have older brothers and sisters that have completely changed your family. Their struggle has completely broken your parents' hearts. I hope you know that your brother and sister sat in the same seats you're sitting in. They started making the same mistakes you're making. And I can guarantee you that their struggle today, they had no idea what was coming. To the kids in here right now who don't drink, who never smoked, to the kids that go to high school and go out on Friday nights and have fun without it, can laugh, joke, dance, not need it, those kids are my heroes. If you are that kid in here right now, please know how much I respect you and look up to you. Before we wrap this up and go back to class, I want to open it up for a couple of questions. The high school kids today had a ton of questions. So I want to give you an opportunity to ask. Any questions before we wrap this up? Yes. It's okay. Cousin. You know, I just want to say this to you, right? I'm a dad, and your courage to be the first one to raise their hand is amazing. And obviously the love you have for your family who's struggling is a beautiful thing. You know, that's what I struggle with as a speaker, right? It's different today because everyone's 6 feet apart. But normally I walk into schools and this place is packed. And I watch kids walk into these assemblies insecure. So they sit in pockets of friends and they feel they have to act a certain way. So they start to giggle and laugh and tap each other. And to be quite frank, I've seen a couple of you do it And the saddest thing is, I've witnessed kids in an assembly raise their hand, and when I call on them, they'll stand up and say, my mom just died from an overdose. And I'm sitting in front of a bunch of kids who are laughing and making fun of drugs. I don't have a mom in my life anymore because of drugs. See, their mom still might make them lunch and cereal. But I can't believe that these kids are making fun of it when I'll never hug my mom again because of drugs. My mom won't see me go to prom. And I'm sitting next to kids who've laughed this whole assembly, acting too cool for it and making fun of it. Like, you never know who you're sitting next to. You never know how much your classmate is struggling, man. Like, you have to understand something. I can't tell you how many emails I've received from kids that I've spoke at their school and now have passed away because of drugs. I can't tell you how many parents reach out to me and say, you came to my daughter's school 8 years ago, and she died this weekend. I have hundreds and hundreds of emails like that. As I told the story at the high school, there's a mom who's a nurse who lives in my town. This mom, she's an ICU nurse. So she's a nurse to the people who are suffering the most, at risk of losing their life. This nurse, this mom who lives next to me has 3 boys. 8 years ago, she reached out to me and she said, I want you to help my son, Dennis. He's struggling. I drove to her house. I sat with her and Dennis, her oldest son, in the living room, and we came up with a plan. He went to treatment. Dennis died from an overdose 6 months after he left treatment. 1 year later, she called me, and she said, Chris, I'm so sorry that I have to keep calling you. It breaks my heart, but my middle son, Ryan, he's struggling now too. Can you come by here and talk to him? I drove to the house. I sat in the same living room that I sat with Dennis, and I talked to Ryan. I helped Ryan. I put him in a treatment center. Ryan died 1 year later. 3 months ago, I get a phone call from the nurse. She said, Chris, now it's Kevin. Can you please help my Kevin? Kevin's my last child. He's the baby. And I don't know if I can live if I bury 3 boys. Kevin, he's 24. He's at my center right now, sitting there, getting better. None of those boys, when they were building tree houses, when they were playing Little League baseball, when they were sneaking cigarettes, stealing beers out of their father's fridge in the garage, none of them thought that that's what their life would be. And I'm telling you right now, that is the scariest thing about this, that you don't know you're the one that's going to have it. Anybody else have any questions? Middle school usually has more questions than the high school. Yes. How did I make it up to my children? I didn't. I stopped trying. My kids were over the act of me trying to make up. I just had to do what I had to do. And eventually my kids caught up and had faith and trust in my recovery. But after shooting heroin for 8 years, and overdosing 4 times, I went away for 11 months before I came back to my family. I was very sick, and I needed to be away for a good amount of time in order to heal. But in my lifetime, playing for the Celtics, scoring a lot of points in basketball, playing against Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Allen Iverson, being a McDonald's All-American, scoring thousands of points in high school, all the accomplishments that I've had, nothing compares to the fact that for the last 12 and a half years, I've been the same dad to Christopher, to Samantha, and to Drew. For 12 and a half years, they've looked me in the eye and they've gotten the same person. For 12 and a half years, they don't have different dad tonight. That's all they ever needed. It's all they've ever wanted. And I'm going to be honest with you, for 12 and a half years, I've been the dad I wish I had growing up. I wish I had him now. I don't know if I'll ever get my father back. I don't think I'll ever see him healthy again. My mom died when she was 50, and my father is 69. And Miller Lights are killing him. Today, please take this talk. Please go home after school. Look out the window on the bus and know that you deserve more. That you need to be better to yourself. That you need to be better for your friends and family. And honestly, right now is an unbelievable time to commit to this, to redirect yourself, to change the path that you're on currently. Now is an unbelievable time to do it. Because I can tell you this, there's a couple of kids in here right now. You will not remember my name. You will remember very little about me. But what you will remember is that you'll be saying someday, I remember I had a speaker come to my middle school, and he said a lot of things that day, and I wish I listened. I wish I listened to that guy. It's an honor for me to do this, and it's a responsibility I will never, ever take lightly. But the prayer is that one kid, and I pray that that one kid is in here today or listening in a classroom. So I want to thank the school. I want to thank the principal and everybody, Ms. Crabtree, who put this together to bring me in here. It's an honor, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. God bless all of you, and have a great rest of the school year. Thank you.